Welcome to Loyola Marymount University. I'm Fernando Guerra, Professor and Director of the Center for the Study of Los Angeles. Today we have with us Mike Bonin, who is Council Member-elect of the 11th District. He won outright in the March 5th primary with 61%. I think we're going to get him a jersey, LMU jersey, with a number 61, and an alternate one with a number 11. And so Mike is also right now the Chief Deputy to current Council Member Bill Rosendahl. Before that, he's worked at City Hall for Ruth Galanter. Before that, he also worked as the Field Director for Congresswoman Jane Harman. And so he's been very involved in local politics as a high-level staff member. But now it will be his responsibility. He will be making the decisions. It's his name on the door, and that's what we're going to talk to him about today. He's won election, and the question is, so what? What are you going to do? What can we expect in the first 100 days? How will life in the 11th District be different?
First of all, thanks for having me here. Thanks to the students for showing up. I got to warn you of two things right off the bat before we get started. I got in trouble during one of the candidates' debates. I think I sort of illegally influenced the outcome of the debate because I bogarted the water, and I drank the entire pitcher of water and didn't let any of the other candidates have any, so you may wind up parched. The other thing is, I'm going to try very hard to resist my natural instinct. I found as a candidate I swear a lot, so I will do my best to hold it in. This
is a Catholic university. We allow swearing.
Yeah, right.
Especially when there are Jesuits in the room. So.
Exactly. I wanted to actually thank the audience before I say anything else for two things, and I know you'll get to one of them, but as I was saying before we started, I want to thank the students at LMU for their support during the campaign. As I said, my highest turnout precinct was here at LMU, where I won 81% of the vote, and I'm enormously grateful, not just to the students who voted, but to the students who were actively engaged in my campaign. There were a number of students and members of the LMU community who were huge parts of my campaign as regular organizers who were a daily presence.
Now, we had competing interest on that, because I needed students to go out and do exit polling, and he needed students on his election day. And so those students who were in my class and worked for him took a C or a D on that assignment to work for you. And so that was a pretty good commitment.
Unless you tell me they're getting an A, I'm getting up right now.
Okay, they'll get an A.
All right. The other thing I wanted to say, though, is I wanted to thank this audience generationally, because today something really significant is happening. The United States Supreme Court is considering my civil rights and the civil rights of the rest of the LGBT community, and it is an incredibly historic moment. And a lot of it is legal issues, but there has been a dramatic transformation in this country over just the past 5 years in people's attitudes towards extending full civil rights to everybody, and I really feel that has been led by this generation, the people in this room who are going to make whatever happens at the Supreme Court, the outcome, it's not a question of what the outcome will be, it's a question of when the outcome will be, and it's because of the sea tide of support for equality that is represented by people under the age of 30.
What's interesting is Kevin James, candidate for mayor, came in third, and our poll came in fourth, but maybe at the end, when we have all the results, our poll will be more accurate. Maybe he came in fourth. He is gay and never held back talking about it when people would bring it up, but it was not at the forefront, okay? And it's not something that, I never felt that anybody used that against him per se. There were also several other candidates, I think over in the 13th Council District, and again, it wasn't a negative issue. You in your status, nobody ever, did it ever become a campaign issue that you're gay? Did it ever become something that you try to mobilize on that issue though? I mean, how do you, because if you make it known and you push on those issues, people who are supportive of those issues are going to be more likely to support you. So how do you handle that without getting a backlash?
It's funny, because in addition to being an openly gay candidate in this election cycle, I was campaign manager for Bill Rosendahl 8 years ago when he was an openly gay candidate in the same district just 8 years ago. And I had served on the council when Joel Wax was on the council, and he was in the closet at the time and came out towards the end of his term. And I've seen how dramatically things have shifted. When Bill was a candidate, even just 8 years ago, we were a little nervous about how that would play in one of the most open-minded progressive districts in the city. And it got mentioned in some of the press coverage. If elected, Rosendahl would be the first openly gay man elected to the city council. I don't know that it was an issue at all in my race. I think some of the stories about me, the profiles may have mentioned my partner Sean's name and that we live together in Mar Vista and that we're domestic partners. It may have mentioned my prior history as a civil rights activist for the LGBT community, but I don't think it was ever an issue. The extent to which it played into anything is, you introduced my background working for elected officials, working for Ruth and for Jane and for Bill, but I also, after Prop 8 passed, I formed a training program called Camp Courage, which tried to harness the anger and the frustration of people who were furious about civil rights being stripped away and train them to be community organizers. And we went around the state into Washington, D.C. and trained 1,600 young people to be community organizers. Not just young people, actually people many generations, and not just gay people, many, but 50% were straight. And so that was just part of my political identity, my approach as an organizer, and so there were alliances I made and sort of, an identity I had shaped over the years that was sort of part of my base, to be sure, but it was never sort of a driving issue.
I mean, you brought up Joel Wax. I always think about, like right now there's a debate in the NFL that there's no openly gay player, but yet after they retire, some come out. And it was the same thing in politics, that, many people knew certain individuals were gay, but it wasn't politically expedient. It would be a liability. And now we're in a different era that I'm actually kind of pleasantly surprised that in the mayoral election and other elections that it's just not an issue anymore here in California. It still is obviously in other jurisdictions, but so far here in California it isn't. So what can you as a council member do regarding those civil rights, especially when they become state issues and federal issues? Proposition 8 was at the state level. Now we're having the Supreme Court today hear about this issue. What can a city council member do about those type of issues?
There's obviously, there's actually not a whole hell of a lot we can do directly. There are very few battles on the frontier of LGBT equality that have not been fought and won in the city of Los Angeles. We certainly need to do more. We've started over the past few years, do more on sensitivity training for transgender employees. But most of the battles here in Los Angeles have been won. We've been at the forefront. What I think my role, to any extent that I have one, is to use the bully pulpit of the office.
Right.
And there's a certain extent to which, I guess I sort of get to be a role model to younger LGBT folks in Los Angeles. But there's a way in which that role is far more important for a young kid growing up in Fresno or in Lancaster. There are places in California that are equality bubbles. Los Angeles, San Francisco, parts of San Diego. And there are places in California which are deeply red states where kids are bullied, where if two men or two women live together and try to raise a kid, neighbors are going to heckle them. They're going to say stuff. They're going to throw rocks through their windows. And sending a signal and a message to those communities is still vitally important.
So how would the decision be made by the Supreme Court affect your life and your partner's life if it were to be overturned?
There's two different levels. One is the practical way. Sean and I are registered domestic partners. We have every right that married couples have in the state of California, yet we do not have any of our rights recognized at the federal level. And that's just wrong. And we could get legally married in my home state of Massachusetts, which would be nice, and we've talked about that, but most of my friends live here in California. His entire family lives here in California. We want to do that in California. So there's that practical matter. But I got to be honest. Even I was thinking today as I was listening to the arguments in the car, just about how profoundly things have changed in my lifetime. I mean, you know, President Obama said the arc of history bends towards justice. Sometimes it bends pretty sharply and pretty quickly. And I think in the arc of my 46 years, that's changed dramatically. When I was a kid growing up, I remember being starved for a role model, just in fiction, in a novel, on television, just looking for a gay character. And there wasn't one. It was a TV.
I feel the same way. When I was growing up, all I had was Ricky Ricardo and I Love Lucy. that's why I talk the way I do.
And I'm not even going to try a Lucy
No,
or
okay.
Ricky accent. But I remember as a kid, when I was in high school, there was a TV show on NBC called Love, Sydney. It was with Tony Randall, and he played a gay character.
Oh, that's right.
But they cut it out of the pilot, and they never referred to it again. The only reference was on that show. There was a photo on the mantle that they never talked about that was supposed to be his dead lover. And that was the only reference. And I remember watching that show just to look at that photo on the mantle.
It was incredibly controversial when it came out.
It was incredibly
controversial.
controversial.
Yeah.
And, you know, but in the past 10 years, we've had Modern Family, we've had Queer as Folk, we've had, you know, a million different TV shows. More importantly, though, just a few months ago, I broke down in tears when I watched television coverage and I heard the President of the United States say that he supported same-sex marriage. That was like unbelievably profound. I mean, and then when he spoke those words about Selma and Seneca Falls and Stonewall in the inauguration, that was just I could not stop crying. It was huge
That I thought
to
was
see how
profound
much
to put him on that
Yeah.
same level. But aren't you a little disappointed, though, that he waited till the second term, really the beginning? I mean, it's better now than if he hadn't done it, but that it took him this long to do it.
Yeah, as a civil rights activist and as a gay man, I was pretty pissed. Sorry, I said I was going to try.
That's mild. It's like,
Yeah, no, I can get much worse.
yeah. You don't have to prove it.
Talk about the city budget, and I'll get into the F-bombs. No, I totally lost my train of thought.
Well, we're talking about how long.
Oh
it
yeah,
took.
you know, as a civil rights activist and as a gay man, I was livid with them. I worked on the Obama campaign in 2008, and shortly after that, they had a big event at the Beverly Hilton for the campaign volunteers, and the president came, and I didn't get to meet the president, but I got to meet Joe Biden, and I lobbied him about the United States' lack of support for LGBT Iraqis who were being tortured and killed with no support or protection from the United States government, which was an occupying force in that country. I cornered Jim Messina, who was at the time the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, in the men's room of the hotel on Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And it was right after that senator got bagged in the hotel restroom. So there were wide stance jokes all over the place.
Yeah.
And so from that context, I was angry, and I was dedicating myself to work on that. On the other hand, you know, I'm also a political strategist. I got it, and I got that, you know, he was afraid of getting out too far in front of public opinion. I think he was slightly behind the tide of history, but I think when he came out, he also moved the tide of history.
Right.
I don't know that we would have had the electoral victory in Maryland last year if it hadn't been for...
Yeah, just one more question on this kind of theme. So how do you compare...
It's always, you know, when you do with these things, it's always a question of who's controlling the conversation.
Yeah.
I do want to point out he asked me what I was going to do in the first 100 days, and I managed to distract him.
That's
from
right.
that
Well,
for
no,
a
we're
good
going to get
15
back.
minutes.
We're going to get back to that. But when you compare LBGT politics to, let's say, Latino politics or African American politics, and I guess this is the point. We've had 3 council districts that have elected African Americans since 1963. We have Latino district, and it's what I call the ethnic sustainability of representation, meaning that we're pretty sure that these districts are going to elect an African American or a Latino. And there's some districts where we're increasingly sure that they're going to elect an Asian. The 5th Council District has had someone who is Jewish since 1953, uninterrupted, okay? But we don't have that in terms of women, that there is no such thing as a woman seat, okay? Is there such a thing as an LGBT seat, or do you see that emerging? I don't consider the 11th district, even though besides you being gay and Rosendahl being gay, you're really the first to someone who's gay replacing someone who's gay. That hardly happens as well. So do you ever see a day where we will have, in the city of Los Angeles, council districts that we say, hey, that's basically, quote unquote, a gay seat?
God, I hope not.
Okay, why is that?
I really hope not. I want us to get beyond that. I want us to get to the point where any seat could elect a gay person or a lesbian. I want us to get to a point where any seat could elect a Latino, or any seat could elect an African American, or any seat could elect someone who's Asian American. We have, I think the greatest analogy between LGBT representation and ethnic or racial representation is Asian Americans, because there is no pocket, any concerted pocket of LGBT population anywhere in Los Angeles, and there's not good data on it.
Right.
There's certainly a good number of us here in the 11th district, particularly in Venice, growing population in Westchester, but it's scattered, and there's a decent sized population concentrations in Silver Lake, Los Feliz, and CD13, which are the two seats that have elected gay or lesbian representatives. But there's no pocket of Asian Pacific Islander, enormous pocket in any one council district. When they did the census data last time, it was almost like 9 or 10% in every district, so there was no concentration. But just as I think that there's a lot of council districts in the city where you could have an LGBT representative, and there could be 2 on the city council come July 1 if Mitch O'Farrell wins, and a citywide elected official in Ron Galperin, who came in first in the city controller's race. I think there's any number of districts in the city where you could have an Asian American representative.
Right.
We may have one from the 13th district. Right. You could have easily had one 8 years ago in this district. Flora Gil-Krisiloff ran a very strong and credible campaign against Bill. Didn't have as much money, but Angela Reddock, who's a prominent African American woman here in Los Angeles, I was actually a little concerned either Angela or Flora would have run against me, because I think either one of them could have been very strong candidates, and either one of them could have won. And I think that's what you want. I think you want it so that every district is a possibility.
Right. But in terms of Kevin James, were you supportive of his mayoralty?
No.
Okay, so the idea that just because someone's gay, you're not going to support them.
No.
And in terms of, it's kind of symbolic politics, where you see a lot of African Americans or Latinos tend to support, all things being equal to a much greater extent, more willing to vote for a Latino candidate, just because of that symbolic representation. I don't think it works the same way, because politics really do matter. Your policy stance really does matter, and it tends to be, like you said, more citywide. We are here at Loyola Marymount University speaking with Mike Bonin, council member elect at CD 11. We have hardly gotten to public policy, but I am going to continue talking about politics for one more thing. The lack of women on the LA City Council. Right now, we have one, Jan Perry. She's termed out. Okay, it's a foregone conclusion that of the 15 council members, 13 will be male. We have Ana Cubas in a runoff in the 9th district, and then we have the 6th district, which is vacant, and some very strong female candidates are running there. What, in your mind, explains the decline of women in LA politics? Yet we're on the verge of possibly electing the first female mayor. Explain that idiosyncrasy there.
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I don't think you can look at this scenario and say that there's, sort of an institutionalized bias among voters, because we very well could have our first female mayor. We've had with Wendy and with Laura Chick before her, citywide elected official who's a woman in the office of controller. So it's not as if voters have some problem with that. Usually the bar is somewhat higher for voters for executive positions. But what is the feeder and the cultivation system for candidates in the city of Los Angeles? Council members tend to sort of nurture, if not a member of their staff, a community leader or an ally to help sort of bring them up in the process. Bill certainly supported. So
you were chief of staff to Bill Rosendahl. We mentioned Ana Cuba. She was chief of staff to council member Jose Huizar. We earlier mentioned Gil Cedillo's in a runoff with Jose Gardea, who's Jose Gardea is chief of staff to council member Reyes. And so it seems like you have two paths. either being a chief of staff, number one, or number two, being a former legislator, or in some cases like Felipe Fuentes being both, because he was previously a chief of staff, then a legislator, and now he's going to be on the city council. And so your path to LA City Council has become pretty clear of recent. Do you see this changing in the future?
Yes, I actually do. I think those will continue to be, two potential routes. But I also think that we're now I think we're on the cusp of seeing an emergence of the next generation of electoral leadership beginning to come from neighborhood councils. I think that's going to happen quite a bit. 10 years ago when the neighborhood council movement was new, the folks who were coming out of it as candidates weren't the strongest candidates in the world, but now you're seeing, when I got into the race, I had a short list of feared potential opponents. And
you mentioned two already.
I mentioned a couple, but there were a couple folks from the neighborhood council movement in our district that I had some concerns about.
What are the duties of the chief of staff that prepare you to run for public office? What do you do as chief of staff for Bill Rosendahl?
Well, it's funny. As a chief of staff, I think you tend to think that you know exactly what the job is, and that you basically you're sort of the. Certainly, when Bill got ill, I was the sort of permanent substitute teacher. I was sort of going out and doing the ceremonial, and you manage the flow of information. You're sort of exposed to the same depth and breadth of issues as the council member is, as opposed to most members of the staff who have a sort of a portfolio or a siloed set of responsibilities. But I'll tell you, I began to develop an appreciation just as a candidate about how fundamentally different it is. The analogy I made is that it's the difference between being a scrub nurse and being a surgeon. You're familiar with the theater of operations. You know what the tools are. You basically know what the procedure is, but it's a heck of a different thing.
That's a good analogy.
When you're the one with the scalpel and the one with the light shining on you. Having said that, if you're ill and you need some emergency medical attention and you can't get the surgeon, generally you'd be more interested in having the scrub nurse help you out than
some random person,
the plumber or the technician for the computers.
Right. You're a practicing Catholic?
Yes.
Where do you go to church?
I go to church. I'm a recently renewed practicing Catholic. I go to church.
Let's catch that, right? A recently renewed practicing Catholic.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a different category. But in the cafeteria, there's all kinds of Catholics.
There are.
So where do you go to church?
I go to church at St. Monica's.
So why way out there? Because you live in Venice. What's wrong with St. Mark's?
I live on the Venice. Well, all right, I'll give you a full answer on this one. I live on the Venice-Mar Vista line. Technically, I'm technically a Mar Vistan.
But Venice sounds cooler.
I'll tell you, living in Mar Vista sounded a lot less scary to people in Brentwood and Palisades as a candidate.
Right.
When I bought a house a couple of years ago, I'd lived in Venice for 17 years. When I bought a house a couple of years ago, every time I looked at a house, it forced me another block east. Okay, right. And I went from Abercrombie to Lincoln to Walgrove, and I'm on the eastern end of Walgrove, which is actually the border. So I think I'm still culturally, in many ways, a Venetian, but I live in Mar Vista, and that helped me a lot as a candidate.
This is going to explain why you're Catholic.
It's a short, straight route on my street from the marina to Santa Monica, but that's sort of the ease to get to church situation. But the pathway back to the church was a lot more complicated. I was raised Catholic in a small town in Massachusetts, and went to Catholic school up until 3rd or 4th grade. Loved it. I thought in 8th grade I thought I was going to be the first American Pope. When John Paul II came to visit Boston in '78 or '79, I made a fake Pope hat out of cardboard and stuff like that. Did the whole thing. I was really into it. But I'll tell you, it's hard to be an LGBT Catholic, and I went away from the church for a very long time, angry, disgusted,
What brought you back?
and full of contempt. Two things. One that had a lingering impression that led me back, and one that sort of prompted me more quickly. The lingering was I got sober about 18 years ago, and began a journey of faith that didn't lead me very quickly to the church, but led me to explore a relationship with God. And then a couple of years ago, my younger sister passed away from cancer. And death in the family does strange things to you. And there's members of my family who grew more distant from the Catholic Church, and I grew closer. St. Monica's is a particularly welcoming parish with a gay and lesbian outreach ministry. Monsignor Torgerson there is a remarkable pastor. What connects me to the church most, and it's not just at St. Monica's, it's anywhere, is that despite my very vehement opposition to the church's teachings on a lot of things, the church's record on social justice is unimpeachable, and it's sort of a core of my politics, and it brought me back to the church. And I got to say, I've been really very inspired by some of the things that Pope Francis has, the tone he has set, and
the first Jesuit Pope.
Yeah.
So one more question about St. Monica's. Do you know the football coach there?
I don't, no.
He's like one of the best young football coaches in America.
Really?
Yeah. St. Monica's has had a losing
Is he
record.
like your nephew or something?
He's my son.
Yeah. How did I figure that out?
I'm unbiased here. It's quantitative. He took him to the semifinals last year and to the playoffs the year before. So it's like a young guy. So
next time I hear the Monsignor bragging from the pulpit, I will know who he's talking about.
Exactly. Okay. Every community. So I want to talk to you about a couple of things. LAX.
Yeah.
LMU parking, education and the role of the city council and the mayor regarding education, and then, of course, economic development in urban areas. LAX, okay. This airport's been here a long time. I would guess that about 90% of current Westchester residents arrived after the airport was here. And we all knew the airport was going to be there. And we knew that in an expanding city with an expanding economy, that somehow the airport's going to change. I mean, you don't get married or have a partner and expect the partner not to change and stay the same. Things change. So the LA Chamber of Commerce strongly believes that LA has to be modernized, and that includes moving the runway 300 and so feet closer to Westchester. The commission voted 6-1 after studying this. What's your stance on this?
Okay, this one's going to take a while because there's the bigger issue, and then there's the micro issue of the North Runway. The bigger issue is LAX. Los Angeles International Airport is many things. Primarily, it is not just a place through which people travel. That's how most of us view it. It's a place we come and go when we're flying somewhere. But because of that, it is the linchpin for tourism in this region.
Which is a significant sector of our economy.
A significant sector, and it is the linchpin for trade.
Another incredibly significant.
LAX is a tremendously powerful, important, and necessary economic engine for Los Angeles. It looks horrible. It is a bad passenger experience. It is the gateway to Los Angeles, and it looks like a dirty, tattered welcome mat.
It's embarrassing.
It is absolutely embarrassing, and it absolutely needs to be fixed. It is also the #1 origin and destination airport in the country. It is the gateway to the Pacific
Explain that too, because
Rim.
we typically think that Atlanta and Chicago or here are bigger than LAX, but in terms of people who actually leave or arrive in LA Airport's #1. In Atlanta and Chicago, it's people passing through that they connect either because of United in Chicago or Delta in Atlanta.
Yep. But at the same time, it is one of the smallest airports in terms of geographic
Footprint,
footprint.
yeah.
In one of the smallest major airports in the country. But
It's tiny compared to others.
But it is almost impossible to significantly expand the footprint without taking out another city or going out into the ocean.
Right.
You have residential communities surrounding it. Every other major metropolitan area now has more than one airport. It is ridiculous that Los Angeles essentially has one airport and the ugly red-haired stepchild of Ontario, which Los Angeles International Airport is not nurturing and growing, in which the
So
airlines
just very
continue to
quickly,
neglect.
are you in favor of LA giving Ontario Airport back to Ontario or San Bernardino?
Well, let me.
It's a yes or no.
No, it's not. Come back
Okay.
to that one in a
All right.
second. So, a couple things need to happen. LAX.
So this is a long prelude to the answer. 'cause
This is a long prelude
Because you
to the
need to
answer,
understand where LAX.
Because this is one of the biggest public policy questions of my council's, the current council and my council's tenure. And it's actually a lot more complex than most of the policymakers are considering and engaging. We need to modernize the airport. We need to make it more efficient. At the same time, we actually need to grow out a system of regional aviation, because you can go to DC and you have more than one airport. You can go to Denver.
But the
you can go to
city doesn't
Chicago.
control that. I mean, but what you're saying about regionalization is we need to use Burbank, Ontario, Palmdale, Orange County a lot more. We need to synchronize it and have this happen, okay?
Absolutely.
But the city of LA doesn't control that.
It has a big influence on it. The city,
no,
the
it does,
city of
but-
Los Angeles owns Ontario.
Correct?
The city of Los Angeles made a very wise investment that I don't think we're sort of prepared to utilize yet in terms of transit connections in Palmdale, which we bought back in the 1970s or something, which was a wise move. People who live in Orange County who voted to take away the potential for a regional airport there should all be locked up. I mean, that was just nuts. So right now there is a proposal to modernize Los Angeles International Airport. It is multi-billions of dollars of projects, and it is many, many projects. The Chamber of Commerce, the business community,
And labor.
organized labor, and the community agree on 90% of that project. They all agree we need to build a consolidated rental car center. They all believe we need to get the Green Line into the airport. They all believe we need to have a people mover to get people around the airport. They all agree we need to modernize and improve all of the terminals. Everybody is in agreement on all of that.
So why don't we move forward with
that's
those?
where the bulk of the jobs is, the bulk of the economic activity is, and where the traffic mitigation is for the community. Now, there is a disagreement over one element of the project, and that is whether or not you create greater separation between the runways and move the northernmost runway. 260 is the current proposal.
That's the runway that is closest to Lincoln Boulevard.
Right.
Yeah.
So, there has been on this issue a reflexive understanding by most policymakers of this issue, an intuitive sense of what this issue is. The reflexive aspect is, well, we've been fighting over LAX, it's progress versus NIMBYs. And that's how most policymakers, the shorthand in their mind, and any consideration
Remind
of
them
the
what
issue
NIMBY stands for.
is not in my backyard.
Oh, I thought it stood for not Indian, Mexican, black, or young. But anyway.
That ain't going there. Ain't going there. You're gonna get me in trouble.
Okay, go ahead.
There are so many things that could happen there. Is that they have generally understood it as being progress versus NIMBYs, economic activity versus selfish people who don't want to carry their share of the burden. And the second thing is, it seems to make intuitive sense. It just seems logical. Well, if you separate the runways, if you move the northern runway, then it's going to be safer and it'll be more operational.
Right, that's how I understand it.
Okay. So, on the first point, the reflexive analysis, the community supports most of modernization. The community supports an alternative that reconfigures the North Airfield. It's called Alternative 2. The Chamber and Labor support Alternative 1. Both of those alternatives, both of them, allow the airport to grow from its current capacity of 65 million passengers a year up to 79 million annual passengers a year. Both of them, equal growth. That's a 20% growth in air traffic in this neighborhood. How dare anyone say that someone from Westchester or Playa del Rey who is willing to accept a growth of 20% air traffic, air noise,
Everything that
commuter
comes
traffic
with
in
it,
the neighborhood, call them NIMBYs. That's absolutely nuts. Find me any other council member who would allow a landfill or a movie theater or a school in their district to expand by 20%.
But what about the safety aspect?
Okay,
though?
that's great, because that gets to my second point, the intuitive argument. Well, of course, it's going to be more
Safer,
safe if you
right.
do this. Okay. So there's three arguments of why you would do that. They all make intuitive sense: environment, safety, and operational efficiency.
That's right. And we're talking about the new big planes that are
Yes.
the 380s, et cetera.
On the question of the environment, the airport's own environmental planning documents, the airport's documents, say that the environmentally superior, their term, not mine, environmentally superior alternative is the community's alternative two.
Okay.
In terms of operational efficiency, which is making things easier for the Airbus and the bigger planes, the airport's own planning documents say that there is no significant difference, that the difference between the two plans, Alt 1 and Alt 2, is negligible in terms of operational efficiency. Alt 1 is not better for operational efficiency than Alt 2. So let's go to the one that, the argument that everybody used to make, which was safety. There had been a few studies that said there was a safety issue, but nobody from the community found them credible. So Bill and I formed a panel that the airport paid for, that the airport was part of, which we called NORSAC, the North Runway Safety Advisory Committee. And we got 14 people together, 7 people who were vehemently opposed to moving that runway, 7 people who were vehemently in favor of moving that runway. And we had, in a unanimous process, all but one vote throughout the entire way was unanimous. We agreed on a process that nobody could challenge. We hired NASA Ames, like the best, platinum, sterling experts in aviation. And they simulated in a mock control tower, 360 degrees, with actual air traffic controllers in the room up in Northern California. I went up. They simulated every different configuration of the North Airfield. And then we had a distinguished panel of academic experts from MIT and Berkeley and everywhere analyze all this data. And they said there was absolutely no compelling safety reason to move the North Runway.
Why is the airport administration and the Citizen Commission, which theoretically runs the airport, so much in favor of Alternative 1? What's driving them to that conclusion?
Because, one, the FAA really wants the FAA's way. But I think that for the most part, I'm not one who challenges anybody's motives. I don't, and there's some people who say, oh,
No,
they're
but what's the
greedy,
argument?
they want
I'm not
this.
talking about, yeah.
It's, I think that they genuinely believe the intuitive arguments as opposed to the factual arguments. And my job is to try to argue the facts with them, because the facts don't support moving the North Runway. What concerns me most is that this proposal is really fool's gold, is that the Chamber and Labor are being convinced that this is the defining project for the airport, when actually it is not the biggest project and it's not the most important project. And I question how strong the airport's commitment is to the big projects that we all want, the Green Line, the People Mover, the Consolidated Rental Car Center, which will bring traffic relief to the community, which will make the airport a better experience
How
for
many
all
of us come to LAX, and how many rental car trucks are going around?
Right.
Right.
How much easier if you have one place where all the rental cars are and there's one shuttle bus picking everybody up, as other airports have done.
Yeah, go ahead.
One more thing on the airport, though, is, you know, the city council is probably going to vote before I take office on this issue. And they're voting on it in concept. And there will be further votes when I'm in office about the awarding of contracts, the programmatic details. But as they're voting on it in concept, there's a lot of stuff they don't know. One of the things that we do know that will happen if they move the runway, if they reconfigure the North Airfield according to Alt 1, is they have to move, change, reconfigure, and in small part, put Lincoln Boulevard in a tunnel. Now, if you're going to move or reconfigure or have to shut down Lincoln Boulevard at all, how costly is that going to be? What is the impact going to be on traffic? In the northern part of my district in Brentwood right now, it takes an hour to go a quarter of a mile near the 405 because of the work they've been doing on the 405. How bad is Sepulveda? how bad is the 405 going to be down here if we have to shut Lincoln Boulevard down? Nobody's been talking about that stuff, and those are scary questions with a lot of
But isn't
consequences.
it usually in terms of the informal culture of the city council and most councils that people tend to defer to the council member of that district in terms of land use decisions? It doesn't seem to be happening on this. And it's not only with you or with Bill, but I think in the past as well with Councilwoman Misekowski and Councilwoman Gilanter. They were always kind of outvoted. And I've never understood that. This is their district, your district.
Dr. Guerra is referring to what is sort of colloquially known as the Rule of 15, which is there's 15 council members. You generally defer to the council member from the area on planning and development decisions. That is a not sufficiently appreciated, not a sufficiently understood rule. I mean, there actually is no rule. It's not written anywhere.
No, it's
just
not.
sort
It's informal.
It's sort of an informal cultural understanding.
But if people say if it's citywide importance,
if you
it gets
look back
trumped.
at it, there's kind of two exceptions to it. One is if it's citywide importance, the airport,
The
port,
harbor.
downtown,
Yeah.
the
Football stadium.
the wishes of the local council member are not necessarily followed. What it tends to be more a case of is the Rule of 15 is, I think, could more accurately be stated as the rest of the council defers to the council member from the local district if they're in favor of a development project in their community. Not if they're opposed, because you get pushback on stuff in Century City that Paul Koretz represents. The forces behind development in Los Angeles, and I don't say the forces behind development as a pejorative term, just the people who want to build stuff, business people, developers, the building trades, they have a lot of force and a lot of energy. And so it's true that the wishes of the council member are followed when they're in favor of something. When they're opposed to something, there tends to be more pushback on that.
Yeah. We are at Loyola Marymount University with Council Member-elect Mike Bonin. Education. The city of Los Angeles has very little formal responsibility for education, yet the current mayor, Antonio Villaraigosa, has made a big deal about trying to impact education, and he says, how could we not? Clearly, in Chicago and New York, those mayors have complete control over education. What's your position in terms of what the city should be doing regarding the school district and how engaged we should be, and how engaged do you plan to be in terms of education?
I don't know yet how engaged I intend to be. You know, I'm actually getting a handle on a number of things during this transition period. You know, we have a very different system here in Los Angeles. It's not like Chicago, and it's not like Los Angeles, and
You mean New York?
not like New York, right? Sorry.
It'd be tough for Los Angeles not to be like Los Angeles, but then again, that's Los Angeles.
That's almost sort of like an Eastern mystic thing you could ponder for a while. One of the things I want to be very careful of as I figure out how to navigate it is not to be a headline-grabbing pain in the butt who makes things worse. Nothing is worse in public policy than some crank trying to look for a few cheap headlines by trying to bash somebody else's problems that they don't have any responsibility for. So I'm not an expert on education policy. I'm not an expert on what academic standards are, so I don't want to all of a sudden be one of those guys from the outside saying, you guys should do this better. The mayor, and I'm not implying that that's what the mayor's done. I mean, the mayor actually stepped up and said, give me responsibility. So kudos to him. And I think Antonio is going to be judged very well by history because he has, although he gets knocked for being the guy who likes to get on TV, he has actually, the hallmarks of his administration have been things he's never going to get credit for. Mass transit, education, those are going to pay off long after he's out of office. So good for him for looking at the long term. What I want to do is I want to sit with the school board member who's going to be representing my district is Steve Zimmer, who I know. I have a good relationship with Steve. And I want to sit down with him and actually discuss with him how I can be most helpful. What can the city do to help? One of the things I want to lead on at the city is sort of ushering in a technological revolution in how the city does business to make ourselves much more strategic, much more transparent, and much more efficient. And if there's stuff like that that can also pay off for LAUSD to make it less bureaucratic and top-heavy so that there's more room for teachers and local principals to govern and more resources for them, then that's great. There's also resources we can share. Parks and playgrounds are resources we might be able to share, and I'd love to see how we can do that creatively. There's also, this is a very small thing, but I'm very concerned about health and fitness and nutrition, and I think there are huge, there's generational and there's racial and cultural disparities in health and fitness in the city, and like the diabetes rates in parts of the city are.
But it's an interesting point that LA also doesn't control the health department. That's the county.
Exactly.
So here you
yeah.
have a city where we don't control education, we don't control the health department. There's a lot of other things that we don't control.
Well, and one of the ways I'd like to help the schools is in terms of fitness. There's a lot of companies that do boot camps in our parks and on our beaches. That's great. I love having them there. But I want to require, if they're going to use our park or use our beaches, that they commit to either doing a free community class or that they commit to doing a regular class for free in one of the local public schools, so that a kid can be learning yoga or Pilates or something. I also want to, I'm not sure how this is going to shake out, but Antonio has had one of his former public works commissioners, Paula Daniels, become his food czar. And she has been working to try to create better food policy for the city of Los Angeles and make sure that to encourage and help LAUSD get better food in the schools, but also to work to make sure that we end the problem of food deserts in Los Angeles. Right. Very easy in this part of town to find a farmer's market. Very easy in this part of town if you have a weird diet like me, I eat a lot of raw food, a lot of organic food. Very easy to find restaurants and places to do that.
Especially in Venice.
Exactly. Really hard in other parts of the city. And so I want to be supportive of my colleagues or the mayor's office or anybody's attempt to try to get rid of food deserts and bring nutrition and fitness to other parts of the city.
And that comes to economic development. I mean, to me, there's nothing more important than creating jobs. As a good Jesuit who runs Homeboy says, nothing stops a bullet like a job, and nothing will help LA's economy, LA's budget, LA's education system, and anything in terms of developing jobs. Urban development, how does that happen?
When you mentioned the good Jesuit from Homeboy, Father Greg Boyle, I got to say, Greg Boyle has, his example and his writings and his talks have been one of the things that sort of led me back to the church. I got to say, a gift I give to everybody, birthday gift, Christmas gift, anybody, is Tattoos on the Heart by Greg Boyle. If you have not read Tattoos on the Heart by Greg Boyle, I strongly encourage you to do so.
I think it was one of the freshman books not too long ago, so I think many of them had to.
It's a great memoir, and it's a great story about Los Angeles and about redemption and about, as Father Boyle would put it, kinship. Job creation is an enormous priority for me. I mean, you asked earlier what are the things I want to focus on in my first 100 days. I don't think the first 100 days is a relevant metric, but the first year, I think, is a more relevant one. I want to...
I guess I meant 100 days because of your agenda. Not that you're going to accomplish
Right.
things, but it begins to set what will define you, at least for the next year. Whether
Yes.
you like it or not, it's sort of like...
One of the things I want to focus on very heavily is job creation and economic development. It tends not to be the issue that you hear council members talk about very much. Council members more or less tend to have the mayor lead on job creation. And at the city, we tend too often to look at economic development only as land use development. And I think economic development is bigger than just land use. It's actually about what are the industries that are strong industries for Los Angeles? What are the growth industries in Los Angeles? What makes us unique here? My district, which is everything on the west side, south of the San Fernando Valley, from LAX up to Brentwood, up to Mulholland, is home to a number of what I think are the existing or future anchors of the Los Angeles economy. Tourism is vitally important to this part of town. We have the airport and we have Venice Beach. I mean, tourism is a huge thing in this part of town. The entertainment industry is enormous in this part of town. This district has everything from, the barista at Starbucks who is looking for her big break in a movie, who has an audition tomorrow morning, to, Joel Silver, who produces The Matrix, who lives in Brentwood. This has, to my friend Marta, who's a film editor on Castle, who lives in Venice. It has the whole gamut. And so making sure that Los Angeles remains the entertainment industry capital of the world and the jobs stay here is important. But in this district, there's a new industry emerging that I think is going to help define Los Angeles, and I think will hopefully keep the students at LMU, the students at UCLA, USC, here in Los Angeles.
But UCLA and USC are not in your district.
No, but we...
I just wanted to mention that.
A lot of the students grew up in my district and are still registered to vote in my district.
They couldn't get into LMU, but, it's just like...
Hey, we got Mount St. Mary's in the district, too. Got to mention that. Is Silicon Beach. We have now in this district, we have Google, we have YouTube. Microsoft is bringing jobs into Playa Vista and into Venice.
I mean, it's all happening right here on our border of LMU.
It is all happening here. We have in Venice the creators of all these apps, Vidi and Snapchat and a whole bunch of others are all based in Venice. We have incubators and accelerators that are helping these new startups get off the ground, helping them find the venture capital, helping them have the resources to create 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 new jobs.
I read a report that LA had more venture capital invested in high tech than even Silicon Valley did in the last couple of years. So it is happening.
It's absolutely changing, and we need to make sure that we make
so
sure that continues.
How do you encourage that to happen? Because it seems to be, it is happening. We see it when we look down the bluff from LMU. You see all this incredible development, EA, et cetera. What can the city, and specifically you as a council member, do to make sure that progress continues?
Several different things. Often, get the hell out of the way. Sometimes the best thing for business growth is for the government to not meddle in it. One of the things that we did, which was a government action, but which was a way of getting out of the way, is we helped change the definition of internet businesses so that their tax rate lowered. It helped keep Shopzilla and several hundred jobs in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, something I worked on with Councilman Greg Smith and Eric Garcetti. Some of it is going to be making sure that tax rate stays where it is, because the rate it's at is sunsets, and so we need to keep it where it is so we don't lose our competitive advantage with Santa Monica and other cities. Part of it is helping find land and property. We're running out in Venice of cool properties that a lot of these companies want to be in. There's a lot of room for growth here in Playa Vista, but one thing that's probably going to be helpful is if we make it easier to modernize and adapt industrial property for other industrial uses, so that it's easier to convert a factory into a high-tech use. Beyond that, though, there are things that are indirect factors that we need to work on. That's public safety, it's traffic, it's building mass transit, it is making Los Angeles a more livable city.
But LA is pretty safe lately. I mean, all the data that we've taken a look at over the last couple of years, crime has been going down. The mayor met his 10,000 police officers, even by incorporating a couple of general services officers, et cetera. So it feels, at least to me, it feels pretty safe compared to previous years.
It is. There's parts of my district. I represent one of the safer districts in the city in terms of violent crime, but some of the property crime and the opportunity crime has been going up in some parts of this neighborhood. Keeping Los Angeles safe is not something we do and then we're done. It's we do and we keep doing, and we keep doing, and we keep doing.
Many have thought, because we are going, you get into office July 1st, and you're going to be faced with a structural deficit. Yep. And there's already discussion about reducing the size of the police force just by attrition. Not that you're going to fire any cops. It's just that as cops retire or move on, that we're just not going to replace them. Is 10,000 cops enough? Too much? Would you like to see more? And then, of course, how would you pay for them?
Before that, there's one more jobs thing I want to say, because I think it's real important, and it actually speaks to the social justice stuff we were talking about. is a lot of the jobs I'm talking about are high skills jobs, are good paying jobs. They're smart jobs, and they're great for this district. But that's not enough for Los Angeles. We have huge disparities of wealth in the city, and we need to be raising the floor so that people are not working and living in poverty. And one of the things that we need to do is, it's not sexy, it's not splashy, but the current mayor's office has done a tremendous job on it under the direction of Deputy Mayor Larry Frank, who happens to live in this district. And that is job training programs. They have done a very good job in trying to use federal money and trying to use our community colleges, trying to hook people up with some of the higher skills employers to move people from low skills jobs to middle skills jobs. And I want to make sure that we're working with the Googles and the YouTubes to make sure that there's opportunity created so that we can bring folks from low skills into middle skills, from low wages into middle wages. And I think it's vitally important in Los Angeles.
I think Larry Frank is the only deputy mayor that was deputy mayor day one.
He's
and will
been there.
serve all 8 years because he's still there.
Been there the whole time. He is a brilliant, thoughtful guy who's accomplished a lot for the city. And deputy mayors tend not to get the love and attention they deserve because you work for an elected, but Larry's amazing.
Okay, cops,
In terms of
10,000. Too many, just right.
No, it's
Do the Goldilocks thing.
It's not enough, but I'd be BSing you if I told you there was any chance that we're going to get to 12,000 anytime soon. We are a generally.
So that's what Wendy Gruhl proposed, to go to 2,000 more. So she was BSing us?
I'm just going to keep on talking. Frankly, we need more than 12,000 cops. If you look at other big cities, Chicago and New York, we are chronically under-policed. And we are a less physically dense city. Our geography is more spread out, and it's actually harder to get places. So we need more cops just to service the city. I have parts of the 11th District, Brentwood and the Pacific Palisades, where there is not a cop on a regular basis. They come from basically Santa Monica and the 405, which you may have noticed is a little traffic congestion. Right. And to get into Pacific Palisades is really challenging.
Yeah,
now,
but they all have their own private security, big gates. It's like, whatever.
Uh-huh. Ain't buying that one. There are still, there have been bank robberies up there. It's a huge challenge, not just for LAPD, but LAFD, where you can't get ambulances in time and place.
But you preface this by saying, you're not going to BS us. There's no money to pay for an additional cop.
There is at the moment. There's not. You asked if I thought that the size was right, and I'm saying the size is not right. We need to have.
We need more, but you don't see that really happening in the near future.
I don't see how it's going to happen in the near future. I was one of the lonely voices in the wilderness that was saying that I wanted voters to approve the sales tax on the ballot.
So you were for Measure A. You were one of the few.
I was for Measure A. I had zero coattails because it got killed in my district.
Right.
I think it lost by a better margin than I won. It was pretty resounding, but we needed that money, and I think we're going to have some tough choices on LAPD hiring. I would really prefer to find any way possible not to stop hiring, because if we don't hire to attrition, we're essentially cutting the size of the police force. Revenues are starting to look up a little more. I'm hoping that'll be enough. One of the things I want to do, and a lot of this ain't going to pay off in year one, is I want to work particularly with Councilmember Mitch Englander, who has a similar perspective as me, sort of generationally and in terms of our experience. He's Republican, I'm Democrat, but
he was also chief of staff and
exactly.
replaced his.
He's also a tech geek. I mean, he's more of a geek than I am. I'm sort of.
Okay, I'm going to save this little piece that you just called right there. You say he's more of a geek than I am. So now I'll send him that part.
I also like to remind him that I got 61% when I got elected, and he got like 58%. So I like.
Not that you're competitive.
Not that I'm competitive with him at all. Mitch is someone I want to work with a lot on using technology to make the city a lot smarter and efficient. The thing I talked about a lot as a candidate, it's going to be hard to get done, but it was both a real idea and a shorthand idea for how to save money for the police department, is iPads for cops. you know, we are still sort of in terms of technology and paperwork and information processing in LAPD in a dragnet era.
Right.
You know, it's still paper reports. It's still guys who have to go back to the station
That's
or women who have to
amazing.
go back to the station and fill out reports, which accumulates over time, which is a cost, which keeps cops off the streets, which is a huge problem. But when I go to the doctor, he does all my stuff on an iPad. My prescription is at CVS by the time I'm in the parking lot. So I would like us to get to a point where every cop has an iPad. So when there's an Amber Alert, they see the picture of the kid right there in the car.
Yeah.
Most police cars don't have GPS. Not for the car, not for the command to track where the car is, but for them to know what street they're going to. That's ridiculous, particularly in a city this cutting edge. So if we can do that, that has a number of different effects. One, it could bring down OT because you're doing less paperwork. It could allow cops to spend more time patrolling the streets and less time back at the station doing paperwork. To me, the relevant number is not the number of cops on the payroll, it's the number of hours cops are patrolling the streets. And if we can increase by 10 or 15% the amount of time a cop is spending on the street, then we don't need, with the same urgency, to hire 200 more cops. And I think we need to do a lot of that kind of thinking to make the city better.
We are at Loyola Marymount University with Council Member-elect Mike Bonin, 11th District, who's going to take over on July 1st. During your first term in office, Charlie Beck, Police Chief, will come up for reappointment. Would you be supportive of his reappointment, what you know now?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, clearly, you know, we're not at that point yet. I mean,
Things can happen between
we'll
now
see
and
what
then.
happens between now and then. I like Charlie. I think he's done a really good job. I would certainly want to talk with him. I'd want to talk to my neighborhood councils and community leaders, get feedback. I'd want to make a decision based on the merits and not just on sort of a quick assumption. But I do like Charlie. I think he's done a very good job, and I'd certainly be inclined to support a renomination.
So on the city council, there are 15 committees. There are 15 council members. So every council member gets to be the chair of one committee. He gets to be the vice chair of another committee, and then a member of a third committee. What committee do you want to be chair of?
When is this going to air?
In about a week or two.
Tom LaBonge, if you're watching, please.
He'll be gone.
Go,
Oh, no,
go,
he won't.
go.
It's
no,
got 2 more years.
No, go into another room. I really want to chair the Trade, Commerce, and Tourism Committee that oversees the airport and the port.
Now, it's a given that you're going to be on that committee.
It probably is a given.
Every council member from this area always gets placed on the committee, though by tradition they've tried not to make them chair because they control. I can't even remember last time that the chair of that committee was the council member.
The committee oversees
Harbor, LAX.
Harbor, LAX, and tourism. Tom is very interested in tourism. When Janice Hahn was on the committee, she represented the port, and she chaired the committee. When Ruth Galanter was on the council for most of her tenure, she represented the airport, and she chaired the committee. It's not uncommon at all.
But you'll definitely be on that committee. You want to be the chair of that
I
committee.
definitely want to be the chair.
And for obvious reasons.
I obviously have a very a detailed knowledge of LAX. I also have a lot of knowledge of the Port of Los Angeles, both from my time with Ruth when she chaired the committee, from having in-laws who are very active in the San Pedro area and on the waterfront, and historically, and from my time with Congresswoman Harmon, who represented that area as well. So I have a strong passion in the security issues, in the economic issues, and in the neighborhood-friendly issues.
What would be your second committee?
I would also like to serve on the Budget and Finance Committee and on the Transportation Committee. Same assignments as Bill. I'd like to chair TCT.
So, Bill Rosendahl currently sits on all 3 of those committees,
Yes.
Budget and Finance?
He chairs Transportation Committee. He's sat on Budget and Finance since day one, and he's vice chair of Trade, Commerce,
That
and
would be
Tourism.
kind of quite a coup, because those are some powerful committees.
It is, but I'm not coming into a council I'm not coming into the council as one newbie among 15. I'm coming in amid 7 new faces, the biggest transformation in the council in years.
So that's just to make sure the students understand, there's 15 council members. On July 1st, 7 of them will be brand new.
7 of them will be brand new.
So it's all going to be shaken up.
Some of them will come in with electoral experience that I do not have, my first time as elected official, but many of them will not come in with the experience in city government that I have. I've been there a long time, and Bill was very new and was seated on budget and finance. Right. There's a lot of folks who don't want to be on budget and finance because it's not a great time. It's fun to be on budget and finance when there's money to give away. It's hard when there's money to be cut.
Right.
But I'm going to get one crack at being on the LA City Council in my lifetime. I don't want to mess it up. I want to do it right. I don't want to be an empty suit, so I want to be there in the middle of the tough decisions.
So the person who makes that decision is Council Member Herb Wesson. He is president of the council, very powerful position. The rest of the council members get to elect him, and I'm sure he's going to run for re-election. How different is he than Eric Garcetti when he was president of the council? Because you got to see both of them operate. How are they differently in terms of their personalities and how they manage that office?
It's hard to say. I mean, they're so fundamentally different. I think everybody brings. You can't help but bring your personality and style with you wherever you go. I come down on most issues the same as Bill Rosendahl, but I come across as differently than Bill Rosendahl. I have a different temperament, different sensibility. We talk about things differently. We think about things differently, and Herb and Eric do that as well. I think Eric spoke more on the council floor as council president more than Herb does. Eric, is much more engaged as a speech maker. They just have very, very different styles. And I like both of them. I mean, I'm supporting Eric for mayor. I thought he did a great job as council president.
So you have endorsed Eric Garcetti as mayor.
Yeah.
What's the biggest difference between Eric Garcetti and Wendy Gruhl?
Oh, wow. Who to support in the mayor's race has been difficult for a lot of people who are active in city government because if you know Eric well, you probably know Wendy pretty well. And if you know Wendy pretty well, you probably know Eric pretty well. And there's a lot of split households in Los Angeles, and I'm one of them. My partner's in Wendy's camp. The councilman I work for is in Wendy's camp, and I'm squarely in Eric's camp.
But the guy who ran your campaign is also running Wendy's campaign.
Yeah, clearly I don't have very big coattails because there's very few people in my universe who've stuck with me.
But what prompted you to endorse? I'm going to give the students an opportunity to come up here and ask questions. So for those of you who need some extra credit, you know who you are, you might want to start thinking about what you want to ask the council member-elect, because he's also one who talks a lot about social justice, homelessness, affordable housing, how to reduce poverty. We can ask him questions of that sort. But right now he's going to answer why he is endorsing Eric Garcetti. A
couple different reasons. One of them is, in a way, because of the students in this room. I had a hard time deciding who I wanted to endorse, Eric or Wendy, because I like them both. I think they both have incredible skills. I think they're both very smart, and I think they're both very good and decent people. And I have a very good working relationship with both of them. I continue to have a very good working relationship with Wendy. And I will not be part of any campaign or effort that denounces either one of them, that disgusts me, and I wish campaigns would stay at a higher level. Before I was a candidate for council, because my candidacy was sudden and accidental, I was trying to decide who to support. And I was going over the pros and cons in my head. And I was actually talking with someone who had been to Camp Courage, which was the program I ran. Right. And when we did Camp Courage, we were trying not just to repeal Prop 8, but we were trying to change the nature of the LGBT community. We didn't want it to be middle-class white guys from the Castro and from West Hollywood. We wanted it to look like the LGBT community, and we wanted it to be about coalition building. We wanted it to understand that some of the greatest allies for the LGBT community have been organized labor. Some of the greatest allies for the LGBT community have been communities and people that we are not there for ourselves. And that coalition building and being there for those who are there for you is extremely important. And when I was talking about this, one of the students who went through Camp Courage said to me, well, you guys talked a lot about being there for people who were with you. They said, you worked on the Obama campaign. Wasn't Eric Garcetti walking the streets of Iowa for Barack Obama? And they said to me, when we were doing the Camp Courages and we were knocking on doors and we were talking to people about marriage equality, wasn't that exactly what Eric Garcetti was doing? And this young student said to me, Eric Garcetti has been there with us, how can you not be there with him? And you know, when you teach a lesson, it's hard not to follow it when it's thrown back at you. I'll also say that while on the issues, you know, Eric and Wendy are very similar, and I'm similar to both of them, and I genuinely do really like and respect Wendy. There's just a sort of a different level of affinity between me and Eric. I think we have the same passion for the Silicon Beach thing. I think we have the same passion for trying to use technology to transform government. Like Mitch, Eric is also a tech geek. You know, he lives and breathes his apps and creates iPhone apps and stuff. And I also think Eric understands the city of Los Angeles in a deeper, more spiritual way than most people. You know, people joke about his different ethnicities, and they joke about how, you know, he can talk about how he has a relative or a friend, or he's lived in every neighborhood in Los Angeles. But there's something about that I think informs his view of Los Angeles, and I think he really has a very deep appreciation of what makes Los Angeles unique, what makes each neighborhood different, and what are the strengths we need to build on to be a kick-ass world-class city. Damn. Oh. I just did 2 in a row, sorry. To make us the world-class city that
Yeah,
we
but
can
it
be.
wouldn't be a disaster if Wendy Grew wins. I mean, I think a lot of...
Oftentimes, voters are stuck between a choice between the lesser of two evils. I saw on Facebook the other day, someone I know said, you know, in this race, I feel like I'm getting to choose between the better of two goods.
Yeah,
which
right.
that's a good situation.
Right. I mean, I also feel that I mean, you know, what's interesting is Antonio Villaraigosa is the first mayor in a long time who was born in LA. And both Wendy and Eric were born in LA. Before that, we had Richard Riordan, who was born in New York, Tom Bradley, who was born in Texas, Sam Yorty, who was born, I have no idea where, but somewhere in the Midwest. You know, and so it's been a long time. And now you're seeing that it's native Angelenos who, in terms of you described about Eric and Wendy, how they're both very Los Angeles based. What I've loved about this election is that you see all the candidates in the primary all over the city, and there was no resistance to Jan Perry in the Valley or Wendy in South Central or Eric in the Harbor or Kevin James in East LA. It was a great thing to see the campaign where they felt like they could go and had to go to every part of the city. That was really welcoming that I saw. Let's get a question from one of the students.
Hey, my name is Valerie. Thank you for being here today. My question concerns just the measures that are going to be on the ballot for May 21st. So I wanted to know what you feel about them and what the rest of City Council feels about them, because correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if they did propose Measure D. City Council itself proposed that. So
What's Measure D?
Okay, well, is it Measure D, E, and F, right? Okay, well, Measure D, this is what I know. So it might be wrong, but Measure D, what it would do is it would cut the number of medical marijuana businesses from the number of like 1,000 we have now to, I think, around 100. So my concern just with that, if that does pass, if D does pass, is just say 5 people work at every medical marijuana business, and we're gonna lose 900 of them. That's like 4,500 jobs. So my concern is with jobs. Do you think Measure D will pass, or if it does, how will it affect the city of Los Angeles, and will it affect your district in particular, like Venice Beach?
Okay, so this is really confusing because there are 3 measures on the ballot regarding marijuana. Okay, and it's all about medical marijuana. It's not like the Colorado one that says, you know, It's like what these guys are interested in, or Washington as well. Okay, so run through the three measures. Is there one that you support? Are you in favor of all three? Are they contradictory, etc.? And talk about Bill's experience.
I will. First thing I got to say is you explain how this isn't like the other states, and this isn't decriminalization of marijuana. I actually support decriminalization of marijuana and free parking at LMU.
I didn't think I got 81%.
Let me get this straight. Decriminalization of marijuana and parking at LMU are in the same category?
How do you think I got 81% of this precinct, man?
It's like, homelessness advocate, whatever, and then free parking.
I know my audience. The TV audience, the audience in this room is a lot different than you probably are.
Okay, so
I'm going to get letters on that one.
Yeah.
No, I actually do. I do
so there's
support,
three of them, though. Which one do you support?
None of them speak to decriminalization, but I actually
Correct.
do. I like Bill. I think it's baffling to me that alcohol is legal and marijuana is not, because alcohol is so much more harmful in terms of health, in terms of social costs. Marijuana is just not even in the same category, and it's ridiculous. But on the question of medical marijuana, I'm not even sure which of the three proposals is the letter. I think there are few examples of a public policy mishandling that make the city council look worse than the medical marijuana issue. I will concede that. However, I will say it's hard to fault the city council for the mismanagement of the issue, because this is a situation where you have a federal law which says that you cannot legalize medical marijuana, and you have a state law that says you cannot outlaw it. So it makes it really hard to govern between that rock and that hard place. So the city has been having a very hard time dealing with that, as I think any sane, normal person would. So there are basically three different proposals on the ballot. I kind of refer to it sort of as Goldilocks. One is too soft. It would allow an enormous proliferation of medical marijuana dispensaries. Another is too hard, because it would limit them without getting any sort of revenue stream for the city. And then there's the third one that the city council put on with the support of the food and commercial workers, which is the one I would describe as just right. I believe that is Measure D. It's the one that Bill is filming some commercials for, so right. I'm presuming that's the right one. Public policy is really difficult, and this is a tough issue, because there's a couple different competing interests. There is the very real and very genuine need of people to have access to medical marijuana. There's still some people who are from an older generation or from conservative pockets who don't think it's real, but it absolutely is real. And I have seen the benefits in my own life to members of my family, my friendship circle, and most recently to my current boss, Bill Rosendahl. The LA Times just did a big story on his use of medical marijuana. They reported on his routine. They went with him to a medical marijuana dispensary. And there was a line in the story which I thought sort of captured the entire essence of it. The reporter said, sort of towards the end of the article, "Throughout my day with Bill Rosendahl, I was wondering if the medical marijuana was treating his pain or if it was treating his cancer. And then I realized it didn't matter. Because by treating his pain, it gave him the strength to fight his cancer." He's now back at work almost full time. They were giving him a 10% chance of survival.
I saw him the other day. He looked good.
It makes a huge difference, and to deny people access to it is wrong. On the other hand, to pretend that every medical marijuana dispensary in Los Angeles is a good operator like the one Bill is going to, which I've toured and visited, is absolutely.
A lot of people are gaming the system.
There are many people gaming the system. There are many people who are using it as sort of a way to decriminalize, and it's not. If we're going to decriminalize, let's decriminalize. Right now, I've lived in Venice for 17 years, and it was not uncommon, particularly on a day when the drum circle was there, to get a contact high when you're walking down the boardwalk, on the west side of the boardwalk, the beach side of the boardwalk. Now you walk down the beach on a Friday night, you get on the boardwalk, you're more likely to get a contact high on the east side where all the medical marijuana dispensaries are.
Either way, walk down the boardwalk.
Yeah.
You don't need a doctor's note, just go to the beach. There's women who are out there in front of stores, in green bikinis with little marijuana leaf pasties on, handing out notes to people trying to get them to come in. Now, that's a problem in a public park. It's a problem when we have commercial corridors in Venice or in Mar Vista or in other parts of the city where you have a bunch of these BS medical marijuana dispensaries popping up that are not really collectives, that are not really providing a service, they're trying to get around the law. That's a problem. The community has a genuine interest in regulating those. So the sensible approach is to legalize medical marijuana, make sure that we have enough facilities spread out throughout the city that people from throughout the city can access them. They shouldn't all be in Venice, because there are people in Canoga Park or people in Wilmington or people in East LA who need access to it. But not to have a proliferation so that they're causing problems in community or that they're right next to schools and stuff like that. The proposal that comes closest to doing that, and all three of them are imperfect, is the one that the council put on the ballot. It reduces the number of them, but also gets a revenue stream from them and creates a mechanism to make sure that there's not a huge proliferation.
Now, the city council could have done this years ago to just have passed that law. They didn't need to put an initiative. They were forced to then put an initiative when the other initiatives qualified, and the council looking at this says, this is not going to work, so let us put our own initiative. Am I correct in kind of that sequence?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, there were two competing things that qualified for the ballot. One was closer to what the council temperamentally liked, except it didn't create a sufficient revenue stream for the city. So basically, the city officials said, boy, if option A were a little bit better and got us some money, we could probably live with it and get it passed. And so they modified it and then put it on the ballot that way.
Yeah, okay. In all seriousness, LMU parking. Mm-hmm. It's about land use, it's about neighbors, mm-hmm. It's about the city and the school negotiating mm-hmm. about what their entitlements in terms of building certain things. Mm-hmm. And so the university did negotiate this with the city. Mm-hmm. And the neighbors were somewhat on board at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And then it all kind of fell apart. Mm-hmm. And then the council office, Bill Rosendahl, now you, are going to be asked to intervene and try to come up with a solution. Mm-hmm. What's your thinking right now in terms of the solution? And while the students understand that, explain to the audience what the issue is, because it's not unique to LMU. We see it in other neighborhoods with high intensity in terms of parking.
Right. One of the toughest things to deal with in city government is that there are really good institutions, facilities that are enormous assets to the community that can have uncomfortable impacts on their communities. Whether it's LAX or whether it's living near a popular park like Venice Beach, or whether it's a private high school for girls or a world-class university like LMU. And the university just had its master plan approved mm-hmm. for a big upgrading and modernization, which is generally a good thing, and there was lots of negotiations around it. And you're right, the city did negotiate this sort of arrangement with the parking. I think the city probably could have done a better job on it in hindsight. A lot of times in policy, you do something you think is right, and then you discover unintended consequences. One of the unintended consequences about the university's new parking policy, not entirely unintended, some people did see it coming, was that people were going to wind up not parking on campus where they have to pay, but parking on residential streets, which is a problem for the community. And there was a commitment made that, okay, we'll help you get permit parking for the residents, and the city has put a moratorium on permit parking because of the budget crisis, so that's taking longer. The process, even when it's going smoothly, requires an exhaustive signature verification process. It can take for a very long time. So that hasn't happened. I will say I have not had an opportunity to sit down yet with the president of the university or the administration. So my position is not 100% formed on this. I will say that I am, there are three there are four parties of interest in this. There's the administration, there's the student body, there's the employees, and there's the neighbors. The people I'm elected to represent are the neighbors, so
Right.
clearly I'm very interested in their concerns. And I'm equally interested in everybody else's concerns, but I have a particular affinity for the workers' situation. Because what I'm hearing from the folks who work in the food services industry is that they just don't make enough to be able to afford these fees. And so they either pay the fees and that's less food their kid is getting, or it's a medical bill they can't pay, or it's less money going into their kid's college tuition. Or they park on the streets, and that causes a problem. So the first issue I want to talk about is the workers. The second, the workers and its impact on the residents. The second would be the student situation. When I was in college, I probably wouldn't have noticed that I was getting a parking charge because they just put everything all in one bill. So, my mom saw the bill and she complained that I had all these other things on there because they put the books on the same bill and stuff. I guess they don't do that here, so it's a secondary bill that's hitting people.
Right.
If the university won't foot the bill, I'd rather have your parents pay the bill than you. But the plight of the workers is bothering me most because some of those are this is a very interesting district. Some of the richest people in the world live in the northern part of our district. They're great, they're smart, they're brilliant, they bring tremendous resources to the city. And then in the southern part of this district, in the shadow of this airport, there are folks who live in poverty. And it's easy to not see that, and it's easy to not hear that, but it exists. I've sat in what are not much more than shacks in Lenox, underneath the flight path of that airport. And there's homes there in Lenox that haven't been soundproofed. And they can't be soundproofed because they're caught in a catch-22. You can't be soundproofed if your home isn't up to code. And they can't afford to get their homes up to code. So they can never get the soundproofing. So they live making very little money, a lot of them for hotels or food service places. And every little bit helps or hurts. And that's the first conversation I want to have.
So, Mike Bonin, council member-elect, thanks for coming to LMU and talking to our students. We
You
appreciate
bet.
it.
Thank you. That's right.